Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my latest live stream. This is live stream number 21 in the Boeing Starliner Propulsion Anomalies live stream series. So thank you for coming along and watching. If you'd like to type some comments in the chat, let me know that you can hear me and that this is working. Provide some feedback. And I'll stick a link in the chat. Join the wait list for the live workshop that we're going to do. So I'll just quickly stick that in there for you. Yeah, please comment in the chat. Let me know where you're watching from. I always find it fascinating what all the different corners of the world that people are watching from. It just blows my mind. Always blows my mind. Okay, so we're going to continue going through the Boeing Starliner case study. So there's the picture of it. And essentially where we got up to last time in the report is we were working through steadily working steadily through the section 5.2 observations and recommendations with a focus on leadership. So we're almost through that section. So my intention today is to go for about an hour, 90 minutes, something like that, so that we get through the leadership section and then make good progress on the trust section. So there are a few pages, but I think we can make good progress today. And as I say, with all my live streams, I like to try to make them as interactive as possible. So if you do have any questions or comments, or you'd like to share some experience, please don't hesitate sticking that in the chat, and I can pop it up on screen, and we can have a bit of dialogue as best that we can. So Bert is saying hello. Hello, Bert. Good to see you from the Netherlands. For some reason, it's not coming up on my screen, so just bear with me a second. Let me see if this works. So it should work now. If you keep messaging me, that should pop up on. I should be able to pop it up on screen. I don't know why it's not coming up on screen today. It's probably just been a bit temperamental, as live streaming seems to be. It's never it never sort of works first time, right time. It's a little bit frustrating, but here we are, modern technology. Here we go. So Bert's still talking, but it's not coming up on my screen. Why is that? Well, I'll read it out anyway. So Bert is an associated member of ISASI, which is the Safety Investigators Organisation. So thanks, Bert. Great to see you. And like I say, if you do have any particular questions about STAMP STPA hazard analysis or cast accident analysis, please stick it in the chat and I'll do my best to talk about it. As I say, I don't know why the messages are not coming up on my screen today, so I'll do my best to get to those as we go. But welcome everybody. Okay, so this is the continuation of the Boeing Starliner, and we got up to, observation 6, which is page 141. You can see there. It is quite a long report, but strictly speaking, it's not just one report. There's actually 2 or 3 sort of mixed together as appendices. So we do have a lot to get through. But once we get through this, in fact, actually, I'll just zoom out to sort of show you the scale of the document. We have basically broken the back of it. You know, we're almost there. So this large section here, this is the technical contributions to the propulsion anomalies, and then this part here is about the organizational and leadership related topics, and then these sections sort of here and here, these are to do with root causes, additional observations, and then number 8 is recommendations. And given that we've talked through the recommendations at length as we've gone through the report, that we probably won't spend much time on this section. And then these 3 here are the fault tree analyses or fault tree models they've used to sort of structure their investigation. And if you go back to some of my early live streams, probably live stream 3 or 4, I talk in detail about some of the challenges with fault tree analysis and how STPA can sort of go above and beyond that. And then these are the appendices. So Appendix A is about human factors, and then the rest of those we can get to later on. So we are, we are doing really well, really good. I mean, I know it's live stream 21, but we are making really good progress, and I will get this finished. I promise, I will get it finished. And like I said, I am going to run. If you visit my website, Whiteley-Safety.co.uk, if you do want some help, you want to have a conversation, go to the homepage, click this big green button, I need help now, stick your name and email address in there and your contact details, and tell me what you'd like to talk about, and we can schedule a call. No commitment, anything like that. Let's just have a conversation so I can answer your questions, and we'll get to it. And of course, like I said, after I've got through all of this through this case study, I will create a live workshop where we can get on Zoom together, answer any questions that you've got about the case study, about STAMP, about CAST, about STPA. And this is a waiting list. So stick your name and email address in there, join the wait list. And when I'm ready to actually run the session, then I'll send an email out to everybody. We've already got some people signed up, so fantastic. Thank you for doing that if that's you. So join the wait list, and then I'll make everyone aware of when the actual workshop's going to be. And as I said, it's a free complimentary workshop. I'm here to serve. I'm here to share the message, share the learning, share the experience with people, so that you can start to build confidence to actually have a go yourselves. And I've also linked all of the other previous live stream videos. You can see there's quite a few there, and there's a few more to come, I'm sure, probably at least another 5, maybe 10, depending on how quickly I can do this. So yeah, fantastic. And of course, if you'd like to join my one-day foundation training to get you up that learning curve that much quicker, you're welcome to click on that link. Learn a bit more about what it's all about, what's involved, and then there is a wait list to join for that. I am about to launch some new dates for the one-day foundation training, and this is essentially a very, very sort of compressed, distilled 1 day just to get your juices flowing, so you understand what it is, what the vocabulary is, how it all sort of fits together, and it will equip you to essentially be capable of taking part in a CAST or STPA analysis. So it's not going to teach you how to do it, and so when you come out of the 1 day training, you're going to be able to crack on and get on with it. I mean, you'll be a long way there, but it will equip you to be a team member so that other people more experienced can facilitate an STPA or a CAST, and you can take part in that and really hit the ground running. So you can do that as well. So with all of that said, let's just so my LinkedIn's just crashed, which is, it's always fantastic. Let's refresh it, see if it'll come back. Yeah, it's still there. So Bert, there we go. Bert, my webcam refuses to operate. No worries, Bert. There's no sort of, this is just a one-way broadcast, so you don't have to worry about whether you've had a shave or anything like that. But when we do the live workshop, of course, one of the prerequisites is you do have a microphone and a camera so we can engage face to face. And Bert says, you're loud and clear to me anyway. Thanks, Bert. That's some important feedback there. Fantastic. Right then, so let's get stuck in. So where were we? So we were in section, let's make sure it's big enough on the screen for you. So we were talking about observation 5, which was talking about communication styles, including times of unprofessional behaviour and language, culminated in dysfunctional team dynamics. And that's pretty much a theme which has stretched throughout my entire career, except for a few notable exceptions. So, this is not sort of unexpected. It's just a bit disappointing. But these are the challenges with any kind of complex project. It's not just this one. This is just an extreme example. And of course, if you want to have if you've had some experiences that you want somebody to talk to, as I said, visit my website, send me a message, and let's have a conversation. I'm happy to sort of chew the fat and get things off your chest. Right then, so I just have a drink before I crack on. In fact, I'll just check. Yes, there is some audio. Right, let's go. Observation 6. So, ineffective meeting practices reduced team productivity and overall performance. This led to unclear direction and increased stress that could have been more effectively controlled and managed by the leadership team. Okay, so again, managing meetings, managing your own calendar, doing minutes or managing how meetings are organized is a critical activity, a critical skill. And how we actually do that in practice, we shouldn't just leave it up to the junior person to do it, or leave it up to the safety manager or whoever it is. They've already got important roles and responsibilities. Why don't we employ some people who are good at this kind of stuff to actually run those important tasks instead of task splitting and switching of other key important stakeholders? I'm not suggesting that's what's happened here, but I've had a lot of experience with that in the past, where administration gets in the way of other important safety roles and responsibilities. Excuse me. The previous process section addresses several observations and recommendations for updating the meeting structure. And we talked about that at length in the previous live streams, because a meeting structure, you could represent that through the sort of lens of a control structure model, to understand what that structure needs to be able to make decisions. What control actions does that meeting provide? What feedback does it need, to be effective? And meeting practices to support information adjudication and decision velocity. So again, you could say that's a type of control algorithm or decision-making function of a controller. So if we're thinking about our jigsaw puzzle piece, our control loop, if this is the meeting chairperson or the meeting itself, what decisions does it need to make? What information does it need? What process model, mental model do they have? What beliefs do they have? And of course, what feedback do they need to be able to make good decisions and provide good, safe control actions? This observation is included in the leadership section to denote a missed opportunity for the leadership team. Interviewees referred to the working pace as unreasonable and unrealistic in trying to find a solution. How many times have you experienced that in your career? It seems to be the rule rather than the exception. The sheer volume of meetings and lack of downtime was cited as a major issue for both technical teams and leaders alike. There did not seem to be an effort to protect the team from burnout. Okay, so let's use STAMP to manage the hazard of burnout. So who is the controller that controls the burnout or the potential for burnout in a team? Who has that responsibility? Is it the individuals themselves? I would say to some extent, yes. So what can individuals do to manage their potential burnout risk? But also, what can the leadership do to manage that burnout risk? What decisions do they need to make? What information do they need to be able to make good decisions? What feedback do they need? Are they getting good feedback from the team about potential burnout risk? I'd probably expect that they are, because it's probably not it's not hidden that people are having millions of meetings and all of these challenges. So what decisions are they making? Are they actually taking actions? If they're not taking actions, why would that make sense? What resources do they have to deal with this? Now, I can appreciate in certain safety critical real-time situations, sometimes, people have to do what they have to do. But maintaining that pace is not sustainable. And in the coaching and mentoring I do with Simon Jeffries from The Natural Edge, if you've seen him on LinkedIn or social media, I highly recommend looking up some of the things that he does. He talks about various challenges with burnout and how to deal with it, how to manage it, based on his experience from operations in the military and all the learning and experience he's got after that with coaching many, many thousands of individuals and organizations on how to manage these kind of issues. So, as I say, just ask the question. Think about it through the lens of this control loop. Who or what is the controller? What control actions didn't they provide? And then have a look at, well, how is that loop fulfilled? What is involved in that loop that would explain why the control actions were not adequate in whatever shape or form? Okay, so an interviewee noted somebody should have stepped in. Hey, we're not making progress here. We're keeping people till 10 o'clock at night and expecting them back at 6 a.m. That is unreasonable. I mean, that's very polite. I probably wouldn't be as polite as that. However, it was mentioned in several interviews that the CCP SCO daily notes helped improve communication and direction. So I'm assuming that this, the SCO, I don't think I've seen the SCO as an acronym yet. So let's have a look in the acronym list. No, it's not in there. Fantastic. Don't you love it when acronym lists don't have the acronyms in? Okay, so what is an SCO? Comment below if you know what it is. Right, so it's not, let's put a brackets in there. No, there's no bracket. So what could it possibly be? Scope, discovered, discover, boroscope, discovery, discovered, discovering, scope, underscored. Right, let's try a space instead. No, it still won't accept that. Yeah, so I think we're going to have to just take a guess of what SCO stands for, because I don't think we're going to find it, unfortunately. That's a shame. Right, let's carry on. Right. So the CCP SCO daily notes, I'm presuming that they are notes provided daily by somebody in the crew commercial program. I don't know what SCO stands for, and they provide that around the control structure to various levels, various stakeholders that need to know, and that was helpful. So great. I mean, that's interesting. So what recommendations might come out of observation 6? That's what we need to think about. So observation number 7. We've got workforce frustrations remain regarding perceived insufficient leadership accountability post-mission. Yes, that's interesting. Following the mission, many interviewees perceived a lack of accountability among senior leaders, noting a greater emphasis on managing public perception instead of acknowledging and addressing the mission's significant failures. Rather than demonstrating ownership of the issues, so if you follow Extreme Ownership, the book by Jocko Willink, that's a great book, highly recommended. He talks about extreme ownership and being humble and being open and accepting when things are not right and taking ownership and responsibility and then moving forwards. Leaders were perceived as deflecting responsibility, which undermined trust within the workforce and among key stakeholders. So yeah, to quote Jocko, all problems are leadership problems. And if leadership are behaving like this, then that is really, really not good. Not only for the program itself and, obviously safety, but the trust of everybody involved. We have to be aligned. We have to, trust that things will be done right. And that kind of behavior is really, really not acceptable for any program, but especially this kind of program. Although this section focuses on, this is important. Although this section focuses on near real-time decision-making during the docked phase, numerous interviewees reflected on broader concerns regarding leadership's response to the mission's challenges. They expressed disappointment that NASA leadership had not adequately acknowledged their roles in the mission's shortcomings or taken steps to address how mission preparation and execution could have been improved. Demonstrating responsibility for decisions and outcomes, particularly in high-pressure, technically complex environments, is essential to fostering trust, credibility, and resilience within teams. So, demonstrating responsibility for decisions and outcomes. One interviewee captured this sentiment, stating, NASA wasn't blaming Boeing, but everybody else was. Okay. You know, it's our program. We are responsible too. Nobody said that, and nobody within NASA or outside of NASA has been held accountable. Nobody. We're 11 months after it happened, and there's been no accountability at all for any organization. Right. I mean, that's quite interesting. That's really quite interesting because that can undermine future successes of the organizations involved and their ability to deliver on complex programs. You know, trust and being humble and taking responsibility, you know, extreme ownership is critical, especially in complex programs such as this. And I think actually I've seen a few news clippings, should I say, or news headlines, and a couple of short videos that people have sent me whilst I've been doing this series, and that sort of highlights there seems to be a general shift in the leadership of NASA, especially at the senior level. I'm not sure about the crew commercial program, but it's certainly, you know, when this report was issued, and then sort of 6 months or, well, not say 4 months later, I think I saw a couple of senior NASA people talking about this, and they sounded like they were taking it very seriously and taking some appropriate actions. But again, this is from the people inside who were there at the time when this was all going on. Great, so let's keep going. So, to uphold the standards of leadership expected in government and spaceflight operations, it is imperative that senior leaders visibly and consistently model accountability, especially in the aftermath of mission critical events. Yes, I mean, that's when, you know, the chips are down and people really get measured. You know, it's critical. Okay, excuse me. So now we're going to talk about leadership recommendations. So this is 1.5, well, it's basically a page. And then we're into section 524, trust, which is sort of 4 pages. So looking at the clock, I think we should make good progress to get through the rest of this today. And then we'll be on to the next section in the next live stream. So here we go. Leadership recommendations. Let's just make it a good size on the screen so you can read it. Actually, let's just have a look. We've got some comments. Bert says secured for cargo aircraft, SCA. That's what we were looking at earlier, wasn't it? Oh, it was SCO daily notes. So I think it's crew commercial program, something daily notes. So I'm presuming it's some kind of communication amongst people throughout the program. Right, so SOMD, speak openly to... So this is a recommendation for the SOMD. So speak openly to the joint team about leadership, accountability, the results of the crewed flight test, and the path to build in accountability in order to move forwards, which can include, but not limited to, the concurrence with this report and reclassifying as a mishap. Okay, so I'm not an expert on this topic because, like I said at the very beginning, my sort of purpose for reviewing this report cold is I purposefully didn't read the news reports and all the articles and videos that were talking about this incident. I wanted to get the sort of formal investigation report as a single source of information, so that as I talk through it and build a case study based around the concepts in STAMP and the process of STPA and the process of CAST. I wanted to be able to potentially identify other things or other avenues for inquiry that would come out of. As an example, if you were to use CAST, what are the type of avenues for inquiry? What are the type of things that you might find in addition to what is already stated in the report? And so I purposely didn't go through a lot of the other material to, associated with it. But one of the things that was highlighted to me is that when the original incident occurred, the way that they classified this event was not as a formal mishap. This term here, and that is formally defined in the NASA investigation process or procedure. I think it's called. I think we touched on this in the very early days of the case study. So there was some umming and ahhing about whether it should be classified as a mishap, because that has very serious implications, and that it wasn't originally classified as a mishap. According to this and some of the other things that I'd heard, is it implies the way leadership were actually dealing with this. They weren't necessarily willing to classify it as a mishap, but now, in the aftermath of this recommendation and the conversations that have gone on, I understand it has been now formally classified as a mishap. So that's on the scale of seriousness of the types of incidents, space incidents. It's the top end, which I agree with. Which I think it. I mean, they were so close with this, so close. This wasn't just luck. They were so close to some really serious consequences. Okay, so CCP, Boeing, so Crew Commercial Program and Boeing conduct a leadership-led stand-down day. Is that really enough? Focused on reflection on the CFT mission, address concerns raised regarding leadership accountability, and to primarily focus on building trust across the workforce and moving forward by reframing the open work and objectives. Yeah, okay. So key components should include lessons learned update. So including specific plans and assignment for what needs to be finalised and implemented prior to the next flight of the Starliner. The Star SDRT update. So these are the two other investigations that were going on prior to this investigation that created this report, and in parallel to it. I get the impression they're still going on, or at least one of them is still going on today. And so I'm hoping if you're involved in that, or you know people that are involved in that, and you think that they would get benefit from, contributing or seeing the live streams, the videos that I'm putting out, or even taking part in the live workshop, the live, case study workshop that I'm putting together, please come along, please have a chat, let's have a conversation and see how I could possibly help. And likewise, if you want to have a separate session, or you want me to jump on a plane in the middle of the night and come and get involved and give you a hand, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. It'd be an honour to come and help and serve. Okay, so trust and team building recommendations from the trust section below. Interactive forums for workforce members to ask questions about the mission, relationship with the provider and NASA, long-term plans for the spacecraft, and an open time to engage in dialogue with the leadership. Path forward briefing, including hardware corrective actions, cultural initiatives, and governance changes being implemented to ensure improved performance going forward. And you'll notice that a lot of these things, this stuff, a lot of these you could say are types of feedback or types of information flow to the team to make sure that their, beliefs, their mental models are updated, and that they can, their decision making can be amended from trying to protect themselves from what's going on with regards to leadership to actually being engaged and trusted to be able to do some good work. This is so important. Okay, so so there we go. Include technical support organizations. So the include technical support organizations, ISS, SOMD, flight crew, they're really important, etc., as much as possible to reach the key stakeholders for mission prep and execution activities. So like I say, if you were to create a control structure model, even if it was just a list of candidate stakeholders as part of your mission covering design development, test, qualification, operations, maintenance, and emergency response, and then of course covering your different mission phases, such as launch and in-flight and return, that will make sure, that will help you to make sure that you've got everybody involved and that they're all engaged. So recommendation 47, crew commercial program: cultivate a respectful and transparent CCP team culture, including direct reports and additional support organisations. Use recommendations in the trust, process and authority sections to show progress. This does not mean everyone must agree on programmatic decisions. Rather, it means that differing opinions can be, this is really important. It means that differing opinions can be heard without being dismissed, and recommendations considered without having to fight for an appropriate review. That there's a lot of organisations I've worked with over the years that could certainly benefit from that. Implement a leadership development plan that outlines steps in continuously developing leadership skills. Include strategies that encourages opposing inputs to be heard without fear or of dismissal, including a balanced style that continues to motivate the team towards progress while also being willing to take recommendations. This recommendation is paired with the process and authority recommendations to create boundaries for solving complex problems. This could include, but not limited to, obtaining an executive coach to ensure continued improvement in growing leading people skills. So I talked about this the other day, actually, and I'll sort of reinforce it at the moment. Actually, let me just see if I can get this on screen now. Right, Echelon Front Academy. Is that link going to work? Come on, computer. Right, so let's just put this over here so you can see it. So I've talked about Jocko Willink a lot, and Leif Babin and a lot of his team members. So they have a company called Echelon Front, if you're not already aware. Echelon Front. And it is a leadership development company. And I'm not getting paid to do this, so Jocko, if you're listening, if you want to send me a T-shirt or something, or a signed book, that's fine. But yeah, so they have an academy that I joined a few years ago now, and it's slightly different now to as it was there then. But they have various leadership training for either individuals or teams, corporates, enterprise, all that kind of stuff. And they teach the principles that they talk about in their books: Extreme Ownership, Dichotomy of Leadership, and Leadership Strategies and Tactics. And I personally got a lot out of that, and I highly recommend it. So, I know this recommendation from the investigators is to go and get an executive coach. I would suggest getting in touch with Jocko and Leif and their team at Echelon Front, because they could really, really supercharge and really help with that. That's a personal testimonial, so please go and recommend looking at that. So that's echelonfront.com, and they have an online leadership training that you can do individually or as a team, and they run various workshops throughout the year. I would certainly recommend that. As a safety engineer myself, dealing with a lot of challenges in a lot of programs, that really helped me to sort of make sense of things and still be able to move forward and keep moving, keep working. So yeah, bit of free marketing there for Jocko and his team. Right, here we go. So recommendation number 48, a model openly collaborative. Hang on a minute. Let me start that again. Model openly collaborative program to program information exchange between leadership teams, including being deliberate to communicate when programs agree or disagree on an approach or issue and provide unified direction for problem solving. So that's a really important recommendation. It sort of touches on a number of themes if we look at things through the lens of a control loop. So we want to model or create an open openly collaborative program-to-program information exchange. So this is a type of information sharing, learning sharing that exists between the control structure for one program and the control structure for the other programs. And that covers between leadership teams themselves, and specifically about being deliberate to communicate when programs agree or disagree on an approach or an issue. So this is about changing the control algorithm, the decision making of the leadership teams across those different programs, and helping them to be deliberate in their communications about when there are issues with the programs, either the approach or issues themselves, and then provide a unified direction for problem solving. Now, it does say ISSP and CCP, so this is the International Space Station Program and the Crew Commercial Program. So they're sort of two stakeholders, if you like. But this recommendation seems to imply another stakeholder, another controller, essentially coordinating that effort with some level of authority and accountability. So you could, arguably use the stamp-based principles and I suppose STPA to an extent to help, flesh out what needs to be done to fulfill recommendation 48. Recognizing that when you start, fiddling around with the higher levels of the control structure, the potential for unintended consequences is quite significant. And so that needs to be done really, really quite carefully. Fantastic. Right, so let's keep going. So recommendation number 49, CPMO. All right, what's wrong with LinkedIn? Has it just crashed on me again? Just bear with me a second while I fix LinkedIn. Come on, LinkedIn, what are you doing? No, it seems to be working, so why is it doing that? Okay. Well, it's still working. Let's keep going. So number 49, utilising NASA assets and resources for facilitated discussions, hold a program managers forum to communicate program manager lessons learned. Fantastic. I think that's a great idea. Including creating a once per year recurring discussion format to speak across programs about technical and non-technical issues and share perspective for problem solving and managing risks. This should include, but not limited to, specific identification of how to incorporate LEO and non-LEO lessons learned. Differences in mission phases and parameters around accepting different levels of risk, ascent entry different than in-orbit operations, LEO different from lunar surface, etc. I've just realised that LEO must mean low Earth orbit. Am I correct? Yes, it is low Earth orbit. So that's what LEO stands for. Okay. And again, this is a similar sort of recommendation, but it's aimed more at the program management function and organisation people involved. So again, you could use STAMP principles and STPA to help develop that and make sure that the appropriate safety constraints are identified. So yeah, so that's fantastic. So now we've done section 523. Let's just mark that off. We've now got 4 pages left to talk about trust. So what we'll do is we'll just have a little break. I'll just have a drink and I'll check the chat, see if anybody is screaming at me and telling me something really important or interesting. Let's have a look. So I've got some viewers. Hello, viewers. Good to see you. Thank you for watching. Please get stuck involved. Send me a message, even if it's just a fist bump or a smiley face. That the encouragement would be appreciated. Here we go. Right, let's have a look at Facebook. Is there anybody on Facebook? Facebook doesn't seem to be working, but come on, Facebook. What's wrong with you? Why does that look frozen? The joys of modern technology. Don't you just love it? Well, LinkedIn seems to be working. Facebook, not Facebook. YouTube seems to be working. It says that it's excellent, whatever that means. And Facebook just, I don't know. Anyway, let's carry on. Let's carry on. Just bear with me. Right. So section 524, trust. The mission time frame became the magnifier of trust and cultural issues that had fractured over time. A lack of trust became a defining characteristic of the CFT mission. Right, I'm just going to get on my high horse a little bit, just a second. Just bear with me a second. So, if you were a senior program director or manager, leader, or you were even further higher than that, you know, in the senior levels of all these or any or all of these organizations, what type of feedback do you think you would like to receive or that you do receive about trust and culture issues? And if you don't have any feedback about trust or culture issues, how do you know that you need to make a potentially safety related decision, maybe even at short notice at a critical time in a program? You know, because at the very senior level, quite often the senior leaders are not necessarily aware of what's going on inside these programs until they go and lift the lid. And of course, depending on who they speak to, you know, passing information up to them, they may not be willing or able to provide a warts and all perspective of what's actually going on in the program, especially if you've got senior program leaders behaving in the way that we've already seen in the previous sections today and the previous live streams. So, how can really senior levels of leadership actually get a finger on the pulse, so to speak, so that they can start planning and thinking about what actions they need to take and by when? And one of the recommendations I made previously in one of my previous calls, and you'll see in one of my previous live streams and in some of the short videos I've put on LinkedIn and YouTube, go and talk to your safety engineering team, go and talk to your system safety engineers, and just ask them. And if they're not able or willing to volunteer anything, that in its own right is some valuable information, because that gives you an idea of the culture that they themselves are working within. And also the relationship between the safety team, the safety engineers, safety managers, and the project managers, the program managers. You know, if that relationship is strained, again, that is another, you know, red flag, so to speak, that things are not right. Things are breaking down. Trust has been broken down. So, you know, as a senior leader, use this loop. What information would I like to get from my various parts of the programs, either formally or informally, that can help you make decisions about how risky this program has been operated, what the issues are, and then take appropriate actions. And I'm not suggesting go and beat the program managers up. I just mean just go and be involved, be present, just go and sit with them and find out what's going on, or just observe, and that will give you some more feedback to then make other decisions. Because I'd argue that a lot of these issues are not going to be under the covers. You know, some of these things are going to be out in the open, and they're going to be quite uncomfortable. I'm trying to think who it was. It's there's a term for it. Is it? It's you can smell the fish. So somebody told I can't a couple of years ago, a few years ago now. One of my colleagues, they were using the term "you can smell it in the air." You can smell the rotten fish. People won't sort of acknowledge it, but it's there, and obviously the longer it's there, the more potentially destructive and devastating it can be. Anyway, let's keep going. So we talked about that. A lack of trust became a defining characteristic of the CFT, with interviewees citing unprofessional conflict and conduct, heightened friction, and reduced collaboration. I mean, that is from a safety perspective, that is a huge challenge in its own right. If people are not able to collaborate, you know, that needs to be, dealing with very robustly and appropriately. these challenges have been long-standing, so they've been going on a long time. So what feedback are the senior leadership team getting that they've not heard about that they need to take action on? Originating during the development phase and earlier test flights and persisting into the crewed flights. So this one's interesting because, and I still don't quite understand, and we've not got to the bottom of that through what's in this report, but how and why would it make sense for them to go and launch a crewed mission when so many things were so, were effectively undone? Going flying without a properly qualified propulsion system. I just don't understand that. Does not make sense, and nothing in this report has really touched on that. So maybe it'll come in the next few, next 150 odd pages. Maybe we'll learn that. But that's one of the questions the investigation really needs to answer. Why would it make sense for them to push ahead like they did? And of course, you've got various flight readiness reviews and staged gate reviews. And I would suggest, if not already, go and do a review of those processes for those reviews and how they're conducted. Because I'm sure there are certain go, no-go decisions in those gates that should cover, whether things are qualified or not, whether tests have been completed or not, whether the results are adequate or not. And of course, those gates, those milestones should also look at these aspects. Are there any trust or culture issues? Is there unprofessional conflict and conduct? Is there heightened friction? Is there reduced collaboration? Because they're all qualitative indicators of whether the control structure and the components within it are interplaying appropriately to create a safe product or operate a safe system. So they, if they're not already in those gates, or if they're not already been audited for those kind of things, then I'd recommend that those things be considered for inclusion. Right, and I suppose this is more of a safety management system topic than it is an safety investigation topic, apart from making recommendations. Right, integration proved especially difficult between certain teams. Trust issues were evident between the crew commercial program and the technical authority teams, between the NASA technical authority teams and Boeing, and the appearance of mistrust between CCP and ISS leadership. Wow, that's the first time that's been made explicit. Because I did wonder, if you've got the crew commercial program team looking after the design, development, and launch of the spacecraft and all the decisions to do with it, and then you've got the ISS leadership that are obviously looking after the ISS and everything to do with that, then why would it make sense for the ISS leadership team to allow an unqualified, spacecraft to get close to and then dock with the ISS? I can understand it was, needed to be a safe haven and it was last chance saloon type of situation. But surely before the thing was launched, the ISS leadership team would have requested some form of assurance from the CCP about the fitness for their spacecraft to be launched and to approach the space station. Maybe those conversations went on, and I mean, it's not clear yet from this where we've got to through the investigation report, but the ISS leadership team have a responsibility to keep their part of the train set safe. And if, CCP are going to get involved in that, then surely there's there's an expectation that they're going to be asking questions to make sure that their part of the train set's not going to get messed up. Maybe I'm reading between the lines where there is nothing, but from a control structure perspective, you're essentially talking about two control structures interacting with each other at leadership level to provide some level of assurance, or not, if there's issues with trust, that then has implications for the safe operations of those two control structures and how they interact with each other. And if there is an appearance of mistrust, at what point did that happen, and how was that actually addressed? Was it addressed, or was it left to fester? If it was left to fester, then why? Who's responsible for dealing with those higher level senior leadership considerations? Does it extend into governmental positions? I don't know. Maybe at those higher levels of leadership, there is the governmental organisations above them and how they interact with each other and how they interact into the lower levels of the control structure. While some relationships improved over time, many remain strained throughout the mission and persist currently. Okay, I'm not surprised. To try and, resolve trust, once it's lost, it's very, very challenging to get back. And in some cases, it's not possible to get the trust back. And so the control structure has to be changed. The people involved, the organizations involved have to change, have to move on, and be replaced with other people. Not through any kind of fault of their own, but at some point we have to change the pieces and see where we get to. And that's not an easy thing to do. I'm not suggesting that it is. I don't want to sound too flippant about it. The breakdown in trust and confidence stemmed from a complex interplay of direct causes and indirect influences that are also addressed in other observations throughout this report. This includes factors such as poor management of technical disagreements, inadequate data transparency, and confusion around roles and team integration. So they are all things that STAMP can help address. They're all things that STAMP can make explicit and then help stakeholders to formulate a plan to deal with those things. And I've banged on about those in all my live streams, so you're welcome to go back and watch those. So here we go. Other key issues identified through the interviews to have affected team trust included lack of confidence in Boeing's past performance. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, is that Boeing as in the part of Boeing that's involved in this space program or space programs in general? Or is it a broader perspective of the corporate entity of Boeing and all of the other products and services that it provides, such as the 737 MAX? I don't know, because as a relative layperson to this, I don't know too much about Boeing's involvement in space. But of course, if other parts of Boeing are having problems that are similar to this one, then of course that can undermine and erode confidence. Evolving expectations from NASA, perception of personal relationships and favoritism. See, that's interesting. Concerns over selective information sharing. Yeah, we talked about that at length in some of the other sections previously. I think we're on Livestream 21 now, so I think Livestream 19 we talked about that quite a lot. Notable trust deficits emerged between certain stakeholder groups. Pardon me. Okay, right. So we're going to start talking about trust observations now. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 observations and 1, 2, 3, 4 recommendations. So we're going to go through those now. Right. Observation number 1, lack of trust in Boeing's past performance made it difficult to accept engineering judgment and increase the need for qualified data to accept risk. Okay, so let's think about it like this. So we've got, as noted here, an unnamed controller, an unnamed stakeholder that is making decisions to accept engineering judgment and make decisions about what level of qualified data is needed to accept risk. And so whoever that stakeholder is, it's unstated at this moment. So is it CCP? Is it Boeing? Is it NASA or whoever that is? It's unstated. So who is that? What decisions are they making? What beliefs? What process model? What mental model do they have? So they've got this belief, lack of trust in Boeing's past performance, and that is influencing their ability to make decisions. And it's causing them to require more, qualified data to accept risk. So their decisions based on those beliefs is requiring them to accept or request more information, qualified data, to be able to make decisions. So I asked the question about when they say lack of trust in Boeing's past performance, what are we actually talking about? Is it a real, genuine lack of trust, or is it a lack of trust based on some level of inadequate feedback or misunderstanding of what the context is or whether it's relevant or not? And I'm playing devil's advocate to some extent here, but the reason I'm doing it is just to emphasize how we think about things in STAMP, STPA, or CAS. So let's identify the control of the stakeholder. Let's have a think about what decisions they're making, what beliefs support those decisions, and then what the necessary feedback is, and what other interactions might be going on around the control structure to this controller that might change its beliefs and then affect its decision making, and by extension, the control actions and feedback it relies upon. Interviewees recognised that there was a perceived bias from many on the NASA team of mistrust towards Boeing due to past performance and decisions. So it could be just on space programs, not more broadly like 737 MAX. Not only had the team in fact, actually, when this was all going on, that would have been in the time before 737 MAX or in the overlap. Anyway, I digress. Not only had the team just encountered the helium system leak in pre-launch, okay, so that's one sort of mark against their name, and that's feedback. So we've had this helium leak. What does that mean for trust? But leaks continue to emerge and change through the mission. So yeah, there we go again. Additionally, during the pre-launch time frame, there was a robust discussion regarding lack of fault tolerance for the deorbit burn capability that was missed. That was missed through the design and development process. Yeah, I mean, that is a huge contributor to undermining trust. So if you get to the point of we're going to go flying everybody, and during a review they find some issues with fault tolerance, architectural issues, then of course that's going to undermine your confidence in the design and development process that organization has used to get to this point. And this is where I interject. So one of the benefits of STPA is it can help with the design and development aspects of these complex systems. And the work I did with my colleague from the University of Sapienza Rome in Italy, working in support of the European Space Agency, we used STPA, on a particular focus topic, and we found some very interesting results, which would have a potential benefit to the spacecraft designer and everybody else involved in that. And so I do recommend using STPA as part of that process, not just relying on the typical failure-focused methods, such as functional hazard assessment, failure modes and effects analysis, and fault tree analysis. Supplement that with STPA. STPA will find those things and other things, that those failure-focused methods are not designed to find. Anyway, I keep banging. Well, that's why I'm here. I'm here to help and promote and support people having a go with STAMP, STPA, and CAS. So I'm going to push that, of course. Anyway, this was coupled with observations from team members that had worked this program with Boeing. Okay, so that was observation. Oh, no, there it is. For many years, and seen exceptions and variances come through on systems such as the fault tolerance on the crew module reaction control system. Interviewees recognise that these issues recognise that these issues and the contentious conversations around them created a lack of trust during the mission. Interviewees and team members commented that concerns persist post-mission. I mean, this is just, that really needs to be addressed. I mean, that's a huge challenge for the program. That's going to slow it down and make it more expensive and painful, and it's just going to upset and burn everybody else out in the program. That trust needs to be rebuilt, and it needs to be built on firm ground. That's not an easy problem to solve, but STPA would really help with that. And I'm not just saying that, I'm saying that from my own experience in similar circumstances. Because as I say, once you start to build, the way I teach stamp and the way I teach STPA and CAS is I talk about three phases: the foundation phase, the modeling phase, and the analysis phase. And the foundation phase and the modeling phase are pretty much common for both CAS and STPA. So the reason I teach it that way is so you can pick up one and then learn about it, and then when you're ready to use the other one, whether it's CAS or STPA, it's not such a learning journey, a climb to learn that. But ultimately, when you define the losses and the hazards and the high-level safety constraints as part of the foundation phase, when you're doing a proper, design analysis, you will identify a number of hazards. You will refine the hazards that you've already identified, because quite often the hazards that we have defined in our programs are not actually hazards. They are not system states that lead to losses. They are typically failure modes or some kind of description of a system state that is all about failures and how failures are detected and corrected. And so we have to refine those hazards. And even just doing that activity can unlock other opportunities for exploration. It can make things more explicit and easier for the teams to understand. And that even that small activity can go some way to rebuild trust amongst team members. Now, of course, when you start to do that exploratory activity using STPA, you've got to be prepared to find things. You've got to be prepared for, oh no, we've found this thing. We've found this thing as we've started to get ready to do an STPA. So we've not even done an STPA yet, but we've found something or some things that are interesting that we might want to think about in a bit more detail. And then when you move into building the control structure models, and I say models because you won't just have one, you'll have a model potentially for each of those hazards that you're interested in, or you'll have a large model that covers most things, and then you'll have a smaller, more focused model on certain topics, hazards. But even as part of the activity of developing a control structure model, it's likely that it will force you to ask questions that you may never have asked before, and the work to answer those questions uncovers certain topics or certain issues that you may never have realized before. They might be complete, blindsided. Oh, hang on a minute, we've never thought of that. And I've seen that a few times over the years. It's always exciting when that happens. And then there are other things that are like, oh, actually, yeah, we have seen that actually, but the way that you've described it and the way that you've shown it to us with the concept of a control structure and a control loop, we've never thought about it in that level of detail before. Actually, we need to go and do something with that. We've got some evidence from service. We've had some incidents in the workplace, whatever it is. We need to do a bit of an investigation and figure that out. And this is all before you even get in to the analysis phase. So you've been using the STAMP principles and the concept of a control structure and control loop to explore and sort of stretch your understanding. But then when you actually get to the analysis phase, if you're doing STPA, the first part of the analysis is to focus on the control actions. So this part here. So we don't even really, in that first part of the analysis, we don't even really need to know the detail of what else is going on in the control loop. We're focusing on this bit and trying to understand, well, what are the control actions that this controller can provide? And how might they be unsafe? What is the context under which these control actions could be unsafe? And this is the real beauty, if you were to pick one thing that was really powerful about STAMP, in STPA particularly, is this part. We don't talk about failures at all. It's just, what are the control actions? What are the control actions types? So if the control action is not provided, or if it's provided, or if there are issues with timing, duration, or sequence, are they going to contribute to an accident or contribute to a hazard? But more specifically, what is the context under which any of those types could actually lead to a loss or lead to a hazard? And because of the way that part of the analysis is done, we're not thinking about or even talking about whether it's what the causality is, whether it's due to a failure or not. It doesn't matter. It's just, if this control action happens in this context, if it leads to a hazard or a loss, then by definition it is an unsafe or contributory control action if we're doing an investigation. And so once we've got that clear, we can then start going and looking and finding information and asking questions. And then the second part of STPA analysis, the analysis phase, is where we actually explore this control loop to understand, well, what is it about this control loop? What is it about the controller, its decision making, its beliefs, its control process, the feedback or control action path, and any actuators or sensors and how they're architectured. How could they contribute to this unsafe control action, contributory control action? And then, of course, what are the contributors from the other parts of the control structure? So are there control actions coming from above or from the side, from other parallel controllers perhaps? Is there any other types of feedback that's coming in that's contributing to this situation? But that systematic examination can really unlock some really subtle but catastrophically dangerous unsafe control actions, contributory control actions. And as I say, when you start to understand and appreciate the power of these methods, you start also to realize that the results that come from it are not personal opinion anymore. They fall out of the analysis because of the logical flow of the analysis. And that's what, for me, that's what makes it very powerful for helping other people understand the value of the results. Because I've had it quite a few times over the years where the safety engineers do some fantastic work and say, here are the failure modes or whatever it is. Here are some safety requirements. And the recipient of those is like, oh, well, yeah, we don't think that. We don't believe that. So, yeah, we're just going to carry on doing what we're doing. And the safety engineer is like, well, I've just done all of this work and we've told you all of this. And just because you don't believe it's possible or it's likely, you're not going to do anything about it. And it just becomes a bun fight about probabilities and who thinks the number's small enough to ignore it and who thinks it's big enough that actually we might need to do something about it. Whereas this method, because it doesn't talk about probabilities and it's not solely focused on failures, it includes failures, but it goes beyond failures to what I call dangerous successes. This gives you a more robust influencing tool for other team members. And over time, that can help develop trust. Because, of course, if you're a safety engineering team that's providing really stringent requirements all the time, or you're providing results that the engineering team don't necessarily like or agree with, then they might decide to go on their own merry journey. And, of course, that's not good for everybody. It's more expensive for the program, but, of course, it increases the potential risk that something really horrible might happen. So yeah, I'll just get off my high horse about that. I hope that made sense. If you've got any questions about that, you want to have a specific conversation, please visit my website, send me a message, let's have a conversation. I'd rather just have for me, it might take 5 minutes to explain something, but I'd rather you didn't spend 6 months banging your head against the wall. Let's just have a conversation and get that addressed, whatever questions that is. Okay, so where were we? So we talked about that. Yeah, observation number 2 then. So Boeing believed, oh, there we go. So that's, if this controller is Boeing and they believe, that's a mental model, a process model. They believed expectations from NASA were constantly and unrealistically evolving. Fantastic. So so some beliefs from this other stakeholder were constantly and unrealistically evolving. Okay, so why would they believe that? What feedback, what control actions are they receiving that would make them believe that? And is it direct observation? Is it direct feedback? Or is it indirect feedback? Has it come via other routes? Is it a belief that's not necessarily based on facts? Or is it absolutely based on facts and that behaviour is undermining their decision making? And if so, what control actions did they provide to try and address it? Were they able to? Was the relationship that Boeing and NASA had, was it possible to even do that? So all I'm showing is just how to use this jigsaw piece to start driving those difficult, non-trivial and non-obvious questions, non-intuitive questions. And of course, it's not all about failure. Okay, so Boeing team members expressed receiving significant pushback from NASA. Interviewees felt they were bringing NASA the wrong rock, or getting stuck in a gotcha moment? That's an interesting way to put it. That is very interesting. An interviewee described felt like not openly sharing concerns and waiting until big meeting. Felt like we kept getting stuck in gotcha moment. We'd just wait to get to the mission management team, I think, and get it. Felt also like some people made up their mind very early, felt it from both sides, helped to work with flight directors who were good at communication. So that's Boeing team members expressing their view, their beliefs as to what was going on and how it felt. Because as I say, there's always two sides to any, well, three sides. You know, there's one side's view of things, the other side's view of things, and then the sort of reality is probably halfway between the two. Another stated, there were elements of the NASA community trying to solve the problem, but a larger majority, it was adversarial. We'd bring a rock, they'd break the rock. It wasn't NASA bringing solutions to the problem. It was an endless game of playing gotcha. Okay. So again, why would it make sense for that NASA community to behave in that way? There's mention in the previous paragraphs about loss of trust or inadequate trust. Is that an explanation or partly an explanation for this kind of behavior? And again, who is the referee between these two stakeholders? You know, if it's Boeing and NASA on two sides of the table, who's actually refereeing in the middle? You know, from a control structure perspective, you know, if you've got a stalemate or an issue, you know, broken down relationships between two stakeholders, you do need to have some kind of mediator, some kind of referee in the middle. And I think the recommendations earlier on, they kind of hint at that, but it's not necessarily as explicit. Okay, so Boeing felt that they had solid flight rationale. So two things. We mentioned earlier on about going flying for the crewed flight test and why would it make sense to go flying when qualification was not complete. And I think this section is about to explain some of that. So Boeing, so if this controller is Boeing and they decide we're going to go flying with a crewed flight test, Boeing felt they had solid rationale. So when we say felt, is that we believe we have a solid flight rationale, or that we just believe it? Or we just feel it. We feel we've got solid flight rationale, but do we actually know that? Is it knowable? What feedback have we received? Is it just warm feelings and smiles? Or is it, here's some hard facts documents that have been signed off by the expert that says we're qualified, we can go flying? And it's interesting that terminology is used. I'm not going to read too much into it because obviously, you know, we don't know. I've not spoken to this person. But it just, all I'm saying is just thinking about it through this loop. You as an investigator, you as an interviewer, should I say, you can use this model to ask the questions of the interviewee. Okay, Boeing, you said that you felt that you had solid flight rationale. Tell me about that. What were your actual beliefs? And what were those beliefs based on? What feedback did you have? Was it investigation and test reports? Was it some kind of qualification evidence? Was it a review of some technical information? Or was it just somebody saying, yeah, thumbs up, good to go, let's crack on? Or was it looked good? You know, we've one of the classics in I say classics, let me be a bit clear about it. With the in the UK, the Nimrod MR2 XV230 independent review held by Sir Charles Haddon Cave QC and reported in 2010, he talked about the topic of safety cases and the thud factor, as in if this thing is big and heavy and there's lots of paper and you throw it on the table and it's big and heavy and makes a big thud, then obviously it must be a good safety case. It must be a fantastic safety case because it's 500 pages or whatever it is. So is that a feeling that there's a solid rationale because we've got this massive piece of loads of paper, loads of pages of paper, or what is it? What is that feedback that we're getting here? So you can use this to help ask those questions and be very specific. Okay, so Boeing felt they had solid flight rationale, but believed that the NASA teams continued to probe for more information and changing requirements. Okay, so they believed that the NASA teams continued to probe. Was that just a belief, or what evidence, what feedback was that based upon? Was it that NASA was actually doing that? And okay, but why would it make sense for NASA to do that? Was that question asked? Did NASA tell them this is why we're doing it? Or was it just a perception? It was a feeling. Being distinct. Is it a feeling? Is it real? Is it a belief? Is it a real, genuine, valid belief that's held because of evidence, because of genuine evidence, or the perception of evidence? This created a perception, oh, there we go, everyone, perception that teams had already made their minds up early on and resulted in the polarization of teams. Once it was finally time to decide to bring back the vehicle, crewed or uncrewed, Boeing felt the decision had been made without them. Yeah, so that is what happened according, in Livestream 20 or 19, I think we spoke about this. So the control structure and the way authority and decisions were made evolved as the mission went on. And NASA seemed to, and these are my words, my interpretation of the words in this report, but NASA seemed to wrestle the steering wheel away from Boeing and make decisions. And that's what this is sort of pushing up against. But the thing is, and this is just an observation on the way the report is written, and I think it's important to emphasize when we're writing a report, when we're talking about these different topics, we should be clear within what context we're actually speaking about. So are we talking about the beliefs and behaviors during the design and development phase, or are we talking about the beliefs and behaviors during the operations and mission phase? And of course, did those behaviors change? Did they get worse? Did they get better? Was a complete flip between the two? And I know I'm just asking for clarity there, and I'm hoping you can see that using this jigsaw piece, you can help ask those questions and be more specific. Anyway, observation number 3. There was a perception that personal relationships had a negative impact on professional and/or engineering technical judgment. Former shuttle colleagues, former flight directors. That's interesting. So this is, before I continue with reading this, just to emphasize, when you're building your control structure models, you have to appreciate that there is the control structure model that's supposed to exist to control hazards and losses and responses to them. But you've also got to understand that these structures are made up of human beings, and human beings also have a social, I suppose it is a type of control structure, a social interaction structure that also influences their decision making, their beliefs and behaviors, their control actions and their feedback, and potentially even their position in the hierarchy. Because if you have somebody who is, really senior in the hierarchy, and they're now working with somebody else who was previously above them in the hierarchy, even though this new role might put this other person in the same level or lower, then that personal interaction structure, for want of a better description, I maybe should write a paper about this. That personal interaction structure could actually influence the way this controller in this higher authority position behaves, and that might undermine, the safety of the program or whatever that is. Anyway, so governance structures. So governance structures alone are insufficient if personal dynamics undermine trust and transparency. Many that work on the Starliner on both the Boeing and NASA teams have worked together for many years on the Starliner and other NASA programs, especially the Space Shuttle program and human exploration programs. The amount of overlap between the teams can be touted as positive, in that teams should already be bonded over previous successes, failures, and understanding of expertise and capabilities is also well understood. Yeah, absolutely. So that should be a net positive, but it also has a dark shadow potential to it. However, these relationships were also seen as pitfalls in decision making, with many viewing CCP program management and Boeing management as blurring boundaries. Yeah, so that has to be, that is a risk that has to be managed, both from a perception perspective, but also from actual boundaries being blurred. So, yeah, I would absolutely highlight that as a important issue for the control structure. This led to the appearance of lack of objectivity, difficulty in managing conflict, and the appearance of favoritism. So the appearance. So again, I'm just highlighting appearance because it could be a feeling, it could be an appearance which leads to forming a belief, but that is not necessarily the reality of the situation. But likewise, it could be, yes, this is, whilst it's an appearance, it is a lack of objectivity, it is a difficulty in managing conflict, and an appearance of favoritism or actual favoritism. Even if even if the perceptions are not correct, they exist and are rampant. That's an interesting choice of words. They are rampant in hallway conversations and outside of board discussions. Okay, so that must be addressed. That is an important leadership issue that must be addressed. Numerous interviews indicated that CCP and Boeing had historical relationships that led to private conversations that the rest of the team was not privy to. So these are interactions that are private but have an implication that the rest of the team was not privy to, leading to decreased trust and increased frustration. Yes, I can certainly understand that. I've been on a couple of sides of that over the years, and it is challenging and frustrating. But again, if the individuals involved don't understand or appreciate, their belief is they don't realise that that's a problem, or they realise it as a problem but don't necessarily take action to address it in a way that's meaningful and rebuilds trust, then of course, Anyway, an interviewee explained, "You're talking decades-long history with folks that muddied authority and roles and responsibilities. I think friendships might have gotten in the way." But again, this is something that the leadership in the organisation or an independent body, a referee, whatever, should get that feedback to then take action to deal with it. So if that wasn't happening, or people weren't able to give feedback, or the feedback was not gratefully received, then of course I can understand why these issues might persist and then metastasize. Okay, right. Oh, we're nearly there, everyone. Last 2 pages now. We're going to be there. Yeah, let's put it's 1925 local, so we're going to push. We'll get through this. Let's just have a quick check, actually. Let's see if there's anybody giving me some abuse in the comments. Let's just have a look. Just bear with me a second. It's still working, apparently. It seems to be. Fantastic. Right, so observation number 4. So lack of access to data led to concerns over the possibility of selective information sharing. Selective information sharing, or the perception of it, is a really fast way to really screw up a control structure. So again, it's this perception versus reality that always plays a factor in this. And again, decision making. So who is it? Who is the stakeholder that is making the decisions about being selective about information sharing? And do they realize the implications for trust? Pardon me, but also the safety case, the safety assessment. Pardon me. So access to data was a frustrating point for many interviewees, while there was also a notion of the existence of little or limited data to utilize. That's interesting. So there's not much information and it's difficult to get to. Some stakeholder communities believed, so this is an interesting term. So who are we talking about when we say stakeholder communities? Who's involved in that? Let's maybe not for this, but if we're doing the control structure, who or what are we talking about? Believe that data was being withheld. Oh, there we go. Believe. We believe. So some beliefs there, everyone. That data was being withheld from their teams or from the decision makers to cherry pick a recommendation or avoid deeply technical conversations in the larger forum. Yes. Specifically, there was a perception that information was either filtered, selectively chosen, or sanitized for the purpose of manipulating and interpreting the outcome, which eroded confidence in the vehicle, process, and people. Yeah, I mean, that's a really insidious situation there. Some identified that Boeing's engineering team presented only favorable data. Again, that could have been real or it could have been a perception. Withheld dissenting views or minimized risks. Yes, I've been in a few meetings like that over the years. There's a perception of it, and then when there's actual evidence that that's what they've done, that really, really upsets the apple cart. Boeing was operating under the belief that NASA was either too risk averse to handle full transparency. So this is the belief. There we go. So Boeing, so this is Boeing, had a belief, whether that's right or wrong, that NASA was either too risk averse to handle full transparency or did not understand the systems well enough to appreciate the risk trades required for decision making. Again, if they don't understand the systems well enough, whose responsibility is it to make sure they do understand it? You know, because that is some control actions, some feedback, some interactions between various stakeholders. And if it's important that they understand those systems to appreciate the risk trades, then somehow that control structure needs to provide that. NASA engineers reported being told that their questions were too detailed or out of scope, with no follow-up mechanisms to ensure these questions were addressed. I get a shiver down my spine because I've had the same experience myself. What are you asking questions like that for? That's out of the scope. But you're a project manager. How would you know what the technical scope is? This is a safety question. Please, could you address it? What do you mean, no? Many interviews noted inconsistency in how information and data was presented in meetings and shared across teams. I'm sure that whoever's written this report must have been spying on some of my experience over the years, because this is uncanny. This included lacking insight into meeting notes and decisions, as well as accessing data and information outside of meetings to enable teams. There did not appear to be an aligned approach or process for team members to access adequate information critical to decision making. This disconnect evolved into a perception that the information was presented in a way that was biased. So it's a perception, could have been real, but it might just be a perception. The information was presented in a way that was biased toward the agenda objective to bring the crew back in the Starliner vehicle. Versus letting the data speak for itself or being presented with the entirety of the issue. I mean, yeah, that is an important topic. Because, of course, the people presenting that information, they may have had no idea that this is how they were being perceived, being naive about it. But likewise, they might be trying to do this to expedite the decision-making process, but they've done it in a way that's undermined trust. So they might be trying to do the best thing they can, but likewise, that could be perceived in a negative light, especially if there is a perception of ulterior motives, such as, we need to get the crew back in the Starliner vehicle. That's the end. That's the answer. That's the predetermined objective, without really thinking about the technical implications and safety implications of that and the evidence that is available and the risk involved. I can understand how potentially frightening that would be in a real situation when there are real people on board the spacecraft in orbit and these kind of things are going on. I find that really difficult to imagine how stressful and difficult that must have been, and frustrating. Anyway, let's not labour on that too much. Let's keep going. Okay, so observation number 5. Notable trust deficits emerged between the CCP team and the various technical authorities. These were cited between CCP and various technical authority teams, as well as between NASA's technical authority and Boeing. So there's like a tri relationship going on here. You've got the CCP team, Boeing, and then NASA's technical authorities, and there are trust deficits emerging between them. Additionally, there was a perceived lack of alignment and mutual confidence between CCP and ISS leadership, so that's another stakeholder. Although some interpersonal and organizational relationships showed gradual improvement over the course of the mission, many remained tense and unresolved. I mean, the amount of stress these people must have been under is just ridiculous, I imagine. And then, of course, those that are actually at the sharp end, I can't imagine what the stress must have been like for them. These strained dynamics not only complicated collaboration during critical phases of the mission, but continue to influence inter-team interactions to this day. So yeah, I mean, that cannot be allowed to continue. That must be addressed. Absolutely must be addressed. Because otherwise you're going to burn everybody out. You're not going to be able to recruit people that have the experience to do this stuff. And then you've lost that capability. You're not going to be able to do it. This is fundamentally a leadership and a control structure problem that needs to be made explicit and dealt with. And it's not about telling people to do stuff. This is fundamental human nature we're talking about here. Okay, let's talk about recommendations now. So we're on the last page pretty much. Everybody, how exciting. Let's just have a quick drink. Just bear with me. It'd help if I unmuted, wouldn't it? Right. I shouldn't laugh about that because the number of times I've accidentally or not unmuted myself is ridiculous. It's just not funny anymore. Anyway, trust recommendations. Recommendation number 50. Establish and immediately implement a strategy to repair trust and strengthen partnerships through clear expectations, open accountability, and facilitated team building sessions. Led by CCP. I don't think it should be led by CCP. I think it should be led by a different controller, a different entity, a safety management function or some kind of program management function that's not led by crew commercial program. Because this type of issue, I'm pretty much, I'll bet 10 American pounds there'll be implications of this across all of the programs, but this might just be an extreme case of it. But this will happen across all programs. It doesn't matter what the industry is, you're going to have this kind of stuff going on. And it's about how your control structure, how your safety management system identifies, recognizes, and addresses it. So yeah, led by the CCP is probably ideal, but I'm not sure that's enough. It need, if CCP has been causing issues, it probably shouldn't be led by them. This level of importance, it should be embraced by them and supported by them, of course. Anyway, let's keep going. So the plan should begin with leadership and expand to all team members to restore confidence, address past issues, and align on shared values of safety and mission success. Yes, I agree. Shared values, it should be also respect and willingness to hear dissenting views and, work with those dissenting views. As I said, go talk to Jocko Willink and Leif Babin at Echelon Front. They could help sort this out. I'm absolutely confident they could. And of course, I could help with the control structure aspects and helping design it to function better. Okay, these sessions should explicitly address cultural alignment on important topics and including open data sharing, engagement of technical authorities and SMEs, NASA and provider decision sequencing, and consensus building. This ensures expectations are clearly set before launch. MMT-specific simulations should be added to ensure senior level management forums are fully prepared and organised. Pre-mission planning should also include team building opportunities and kick-off sessions to align roles, goals, and expectations to mitigate stress and fatigue impacts. Leadership should conduct regular pulse checks. That's type of feedback. Rotate high-pressure responsibilities. Yeah, I think that's interesting. And ensure contingency staffing to provide fresh perspectives. Protecting time for deep work. Oh God, yeah. That is so important. And proactively addressing burnout will also improve decision-making effectiveness under mission conditions. Yes, I've experienced a lot of issues with deep work and burnout, and that's one of the reasons why I started working with Simon Jeffries and his team at the Natural Edge. So I'd certainly look into that as well. If you're struggling with burnout, there are people out there that can help. Do not let it persist because it will affect your personal health, and of course that'll have an impact not only on you but also your family, your loved ones, and your overall goals in life. So don't let burnout and stress get out of control. And of course, protecting time for deep work. The nature of the stuff that we do as engineers is, we need deep work. We need time to be able to focus and think, to absorb information, to really let it sort of percolate and settle in. That's what engineering is all about. And if, your work environment, Teams binging away and instant messages and Slack and millions of emails and all of this administrative noise, you really need to develop skills to be able to protect that time, to be able to do deep work. And in fact, Alex Hormozy, if you search for Alex Hormozy on YouTube, Alex and his wife Layla, they talk about the concept of manager time and maker time. And so if you are an engineer, you'll probably be structuring your work, your effort around as though you are a maker. It's a creative activity. And if you're a manager or a leader, you will probably structure your time more as a manager time. And of course, if you're doing both of those, you might need manager and maker time. And the way you structure your calendar, the way that meetings are programmed, that should be done collaboratively across your teams and your stakeholders. So I'd recommend looking that up as well. So Alex Hormozy, Layla Hormozy, and manager and maker time on YouTube. Fantastic video. Highly recommend looking at that. That was really helpful for me and the stuff that I do. Okay, recommendation number 51. CCP Boeing support organizations team leadership to rectify and repair trust across teams. Openly discuss the perception of how leadership personal relationships could have caused team members to question leadership's judgment and effectiveness during the mission. This should include steps forward to repair this perception to rebuild trust across the teams. Examples: NASA and Boeing, CCP and technical authorities, Flight Operations Director, I think, ISSP, CCP, Boeing and NASA TAs, etc. So that's a lot of work to do there, and over and above everybody's day job as well. I mean, that should be part of their day job. I'm not saying it shouldn't. I'm just saying the way they're configured at the moment might not, will need to change. Number 52, establish and ensure alignment of leadership and teaming expectations around transparency, risk acceptance, and engineering rigor. Leadership and teaming expectations. Is this just team? Does it mean just team expectations? I think it does. Anyway, 53. Outline how information, processes, and data will be presented, discussed, debated among technical teams to ensure meetings and presentations uphold credibility standards and requirements metrics to make decisions. So this is a really easy to say recommendation, but how it's actually implemented is very, very challenging, but it is so critical, because this is essentially talking about how do these stakeholders, these controllers, interact with each other, provide information with each other, make decisions, and then enact the results of those decisions. How do you document it? How do you make sure that as things evolve, as understanding changes, you keep track of it? And at the moment, most organizations probably use PowerPoint and copy of PowerPoint, copy 2, copy 3, whatever, master copy, all these different versions. And of course, then using Microsoft Teams or SharePoint to manage those versions or via email is a nightmare. So yeah, that's the end of that section. So that is, what is it? That was section 524. So we've now done that. We've now completed section 5, everybody. Yeah, look at that. Fantastic. Right, so the next section is section 6, root causes. So what I'm going to do is we'll fly over here to section 6, root causes. Right, so this section is only 4 pages. So this is fantastic. We'll get through that really quickly and we will do it on Wednesday. That's when the next live stream is scheduled, Wednesday. And then observations, that's 5 pages. And then recommendations. So there is a strong chance, though not certain, strong chance we will get through this in live stream 22, maybe 23. And then any live stream after that will be focused on the appendices. So the appendices consist of, well, a lot of appendices, as you can see. So we've got human factors, the Likert scale data, references. So this, let me just highlight this one. So this one should be quick, I think. This one should be like 2 minutes. This one will be like 1 minute, I think. That next one, E, might take a little bit longer. Maybe, oh, it's only 1 page, so that'll be quick. Investigation team chartering memo. I'm going to spend a bit of time on that because I think it's important to understand what is the controller, the stakeholder that's doing the investigation? What are what are their decision making? What's their control algorithm? And then what are their beliefs, their mental models, their process model, and what control actions can they provide? What feedback do they receive, and what is the scope of their investigation? So that'll be interesting to talk about. The CCP Star SDRT report, that is massive. As you can see, it's over 100 pages. So that bit is going to take probably 4 or 5 live streams, I think, maybe longer. That's a big bulk of work. And then the last part is the survey, senior review panel response to the investigation team. So I think we are getting there. We're only a few live streams away from finishing the body of the report, and then the real work will start when we look at the other investigation reports. So yeah, fantastic. Right, okay. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that session today. As I say, if you do have any questions or comments, you are welcome to send me a message via my website. You're welcome to sign up on the... Let's just go back to the homepage. For some reason, my homepage is not working. Come on, there we go. You can go to my homepage, press this button here. I need help now. Send me a message. Let's have a conversation. Or you can join the waiting list for the free workshop where we will talk about everything, that we've gone through in this case study. And then if you want some free foundation, sorry, not free. If you want some foundation training to get you up to speed, it's 1 day. It's compressed. It will turn you into a team member who can contribute to a stamp STPA or cast analyses. And of course, in that live training, I will share a lot of my experience over the last sort of 15, 17 or so years working with stamp STPA and cast. And of course, my over 20 years working as a system safety engineer on very complex, high stakes programs. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on Wednesday on the next live stream. So have a good evening. Take care.